good day, everybody. We're here again. It's Atlanta Discuss. Yes, state of the nation, Nigeria, the Nigeria with the largest concentration of Black people. The Nigeria that has been in the news for all the bad things, I mean, now we heard the Americans want to move their non-essential stuff out of Nigeria. There are issues relating to terrorism. Killings today, just yesterday, a general was killed, and the day before. So it's getting to be a case of this, that, what's next, what will happen. Now, the major one is the lack of recognition by the Independent National Electoral Commission of the major opposition party leadership. That's the ADC. We don't know why INEC took that decision. It's not in their power to do so. One will expect that the judiciary should be the one to do that. But INEC clearly acting out of his administrative duties. So, but then we need to talk to people who knows, people who are erudite, scholarly, and people who say who are true to power, who say it the way it should be said, and people who have in the last 20, 30, even 40 years advised Nigeria as a country on how things should be done, things that should be avoided. And of course, those advice were never taken, hence the situation Nigeria is in right now. But then all hope is not lost. They're still in the game, they're still advising. That's why today we call on our mentor leader, Professor Pat Utomi. Prof is in transit, so I just had to get him out to. Prof, welcome, sir.
Thank you so very much.
Yeah. So we're looking at INEC's independence and issue of public trust. So I know you're pressed for time, so I'm going to keep it as fast as possible. So from your perspective right now, how independent is the Independent National Electoral Commission? Not just on paper, what are the biggest constraints to the independence of that body today, sir? Over to you.
Oh, thank you. I think the real big challenge is that the current administration in Abuja has prioritized a certain fear of certain opposition candidates. And I've been putting pressure on INEC, whether they can admit that publicly or not is another matter. But anybody who can read tea leaves, who knows how to track these things, can see that so very easily. What has happened is that the new leadership at INEC seems to have buckled under that pressure. And something that the Yakubu, we said all kinds of things about the former INEC leadership, but that leadership had approved the transitions in ADC leadership. And then suddenly the new administration at INEC didn't seem to have the, shall we say, the fiber to stand for what is appropriate. And then they wake up one day, and it was foretold, like 4 days or 5 days before, we were even getting memos being circulated, saying that INEC must do something to prevent ADC from, moving forward. And so when the thing was announced, most well-informed people were not surprised. It does indeed show how not independent INEC is, and it's an appropriate thing to do at this point to call for that INEC leadership to step down. Otherwise, we're making a mockery of elections in 2027.
So your position now is that Amupitan should not be the chairman of INEC again?
Yes, he should not.
Oh, wow.
And quite frankly, I think we should also review how INEC is appointed. Whether that is possible right now before the elections or not is another matter, but we should review it. One person who is
That's
involved.
Actually the next question. I was going to ask, to what extent does the current method of appointing INEC leadership affect public confidence, and what reform would you propose to make the process more credible?
Yes.
I know we had the waste report in the past, and Yaradua died, and every other thing died with it, And so what do you propose?
Yeah, the waste report went quite far in that regard. Implementing everything that they put out is important. But I would also say that perhaps one of the ways to go about this INEC thing to ensure that there is balance is to ask the three leading political parties to each nominate a person to INEC, and then those that are nominated will, from amongst themselves, choose a chair. I think that it will give people more sense of confidence in an INEC than the present one, in which people are openly saying that the INEC acts like a parastatal of the APC, as we can see with this particular decision on the ADC.
Okay. Let's look at technology and issue of trust now. INEC has introduced technology like beavers. Yes, skepticism remains. Why hasn't technology fully translated into public trust, and what is missing?
What is missing is that INEC has constantly, let's say, politicians have constantly looked for loopholes to enable manual operations that they can influence to rig elections. That is the naked truth. I mean, when this whole idea was introduced to use electronic transmission more than a decade ago, people raised the question, would the reach of coverage in terms of internet operations, would it be adequate? NCC said very firmly back then that coverage was adequate, and that, in fact, before the next election, it would even be total. Second, the nature of the technology is such that it really doesn't matter if there is a break in coverage. Once, like WhatsApp, all of us use WhatsApp, you hit coverage, what was uploaded will appear.
Yeah, that's true.
So that can surely be done. The reason that the Assembly forces so much about it is very obvious. They would like that loophole to be able to manipulate election results. That's marks of either contempt for the people who are voting, or a desperation to be able to manipulate the vote, or like Stalin, once said, the voters don't really matter. It's the people who count the vote that decide. And the people who count the vote seem really anxious to prevent the people from voting in a way that counts, so that they decide the outcome of the vote. This is not democracy. This is what gives bite to the tracking, the longitudinal tracking by Afrobarometer, which shows since 1999 continually that the Nigerian people like democracy, prefer democracy, but don't trust that democracy is working. Now, this creates a legitimacy crisis for the state. And I wonder why politicians don't want to pay attention to this. And again, this leads me to the problem of institutions and national performance. And I use a very simple illustration on this, a comparison between Argentina and the United States of America. I remind people that in 1928, Argentina and the US were peer comparison countries, same level of development. Many people even gave Argentina greater prospects than the United States of America. And what happens? By 1988, 60 years later, the United States is by far the world's preeminent economy, and Argentina is down to West Africa level GDP.
Wow.
What happened to Argentina? I mean, there's enough data, even a book, False Economy, which compares the two countries, and all that, writings. They show what happened to Argentina is precisely because political leaders there became like the kind of political leaders we have in power now in Nigeria, who began to damage their institutions in favor of one-man rule, in favor of this populist thing under Peron. By the time they were done damaging the institutions, and anybody who's studying economic development today knows that central to development is the strength of institutions. And we see INEC being damaged as an institution. We see the judiciary being damaged as fundamental institution for progress, the rule of law being violated daily in Nigeria. And the question therefore remains, is the goal of the president to put Nigeria on the road to Argentina? Or could we do better and find the road to the United States of America?
Okay, I have two more questions. I know you are pressed for time. There's been serious allegations against the president that he wants to perpetuate himself in power, that even if he gets a second term now, that he probably doesn't want to leave power. But my question is, there's a serious one, everybody saying that the APC wants a one-party style of democracy. They want Tinubu to be the only person on the ballot, and no other party should be there, no other candidate. Do you agree with these allegations, or do you see it the way it's been said?
Well, as I say, there's no smoke without fire. There are obviously things that you see that point to those kinds of orientation, and you wonder, are these people wise people? Because we've gone through this in Africa. You know, back in the 70s, the idea was that, there are too many divisions in Africa. If we had one party rule, then there'll be consensus that is forced and progress will take place. Unfortunately, as we know, that's not what happened. We then had to try and escape those problems by turning to those constitutional or sovereign national conferences in many African countries. And then eventually we began to wind our way back to multi-party democracies. But the politicians continued to abuse that. And we are in a situation where today in Africa, we really do not have working multi-party democracies. In the same manner, economic development is slipping and sliding compared to what happened in the 1950s, for example, between self-government and independence in Nigeria, 56 to 1960. You can see how the economy surged. You can see the quality of leadership. And compared to what we see today, we know clearly that multi-party democracies in which we had, the principle of subsidiarity, decentralization,
Okay. Last question to you is this. If you were advising the government today, as in the government of President Bola Tinubu, what 3 immediate steps will you recommend to them to strengthen INEC's independence and restore credibility before the next election? Because it does look like every election cycle, almost the same things repeat itself. In 79, the military were doing it. So in 99, the military did it. So it just looks like the only semblance of credibility we have is when the military have handed over to the civilian, which is not 100% itself. But the minute the military leaves it to the civilian, everything goes gaga. So what 3 immediate steps will you advise them right now, if they are sincere at all, anyway?
Well, I think that the most important thing to do is ensure that there is a truly independent INEC. And we can get that in a variety of ways. I guess I just suggested one way: let all the partisans nominate somebody. Let strong civil society become involved in the process and reduce the level of partisanship. But more importantly, I think the more or the less politics is attractive materially, the more the kind of people who step forward will be essentially people who just want to serve for the glory, immortality. But right now, what is happening is that all kinds of adventurers, people who see it as a business venture, all of them are involved, and they do anything and everything to corral and retain power. Another thing that they can do, is extreme, but when you get to this kind of stage, you may want to apply extreme measures. Why don't you increase international play in elections? I mean, what's the big thing? We're not doing well ourselves and making a mockery of ourselves. Hey, calling the international community to help us organize these things. It's very extreme, but we should be able to say the strength of our democracy is good for us. So if we appear to lose, quote unquote, sovereignty, which is not what it is, in terms of allowing international organization of that process, maybe we'll make progress. 3, get the judiciary out of party internal affairs. In fact, if I have my way, there is only one decision judges should be able to make. And that is the decision of if we run elections, nothing about internal democracy or the parties. Yeah. Party is an association. Any group of people can form any association they like. They then go to the polls. If the polls then take place and there is a question of something not going right, it can then go to a court. And that court can only do one thing: send the people back to vote again, not determine who won. Unless we get the judiciary out of this process, we're going to corrupt the judiciary. And as it corrupts the judiciary, it will make democracy a greater mess.
Wow. What's our worst case scenario? I mean, you've given this advice, and I mean, they're not, they might not take it, but at the rate at which we're going, what's our worst case scenario? Because everybody is complaining, they're worried. Our elections in the past, I used to say we're free but not fair. Now they're not free and not fair, and we claim to be a democracy. So what's our worst case scenario? I mean, I know you always give an historical reference. That's why I'm asking for people that are worried. And
yeah, well, worst case scenario is anarchy.
Oh wow!
And it can happen. It really can happen. What we must do, in my view, is essentially to say to ourselves, what's bigger than the future of our children, and sacrificially allow process to take place so that we can have a democracy that is legit and has legitimacy and can allow the country to make progress.
Wow. Thank you very much for your time. I know you are pressed for time also. Thank you for honoring our call, for heeding our call, and I wish you a safe trip to where you're going. Thank you very much once again.
Thanks so much. It's a good pleasure.
So to all our viewers, it's a wrap there. Professor Utomi has said it. Judge Amupitan has to go to ensure he has lost, to ensure credibility. He has lost that moral right to be, to be an arbiter, and the federal government should do everything possible.
Yes.
To make sure that the election. We have learned from Ghana, the countries. So thank you. See you all next week.